All right, so today we're diving into a framework that really caught my eye. It's called the evolution model. And
Yeah.
we've got a couple of sources here, a conversation where they kind of introduce this idea and then a follow-up where they get into the different stages.
Yeah.
Our mission today, I think, is to see how this model can actually help us kind of predict or at least understand business growth.
Mm,
You know,
I like that.
taking us from those early steps all the way to some really advanced strategies.
Cool. Yeah, the heart of this evolution model, it's this really interesting concept that business growth isn't just, random or luck. It
Mhm.
actually follows these pretty distinct stages.
Mm-hmm.
And each stage requires a bit more sophistication, business acumen than the one before.
Yeah, yeah.
And the model lays out this journey that moves from what they call the bootstrapper to the executive and then finally to the investor stage.
Right.
And that progression is really what shapes the business's ability to scale and how much leverage it can create.
Yeah, I love that. And I think for the learner, listening to this model could be a huge shift
Hmm.
because it's about moving away from kind of that guessing game that business growth can often feel like,
Right.
towards a much more intentional path.
Hmm.
And the model suggests that there are these predictable stages,
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
So if we can pinpoint where we are and what's coming next, it gives us a much clearer sense of what to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So hopefully, today we'll uncover some of those aha moments as we kind of dig into these patterns of how businesses evolve.
I think we will. I think what's so powerful about this model is its predictive nature, right? So,
Yeah.
knowing the stages, it's not just about labeling yourself. It's understanding, okay, what type of work am I doing?
Right.
How do I need to think differently? What are the key activities that need to happen for me to move to that next stage?
Mm,
This is the kind of stuff that can really sharpen your decision making and how you set your goals,
totally. Okay, so let's start unpacking this.
Yeah.
Where does this journey typically begin?
So it all starts with the bootstrapper stage.
All right.
And the focus here is really on figuring out what you're good at the core level.
Okay.
Your core competencies, what are the fundamental skills that you have, and then also what's the value that you can bring to the marketplace.
So this is kind of that messy period that we always hear about, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like where you're just experimenting,
Of
trying to
course.
figure out exactly what it is you're offering, and the feedback from customers is probably pretty limited.
Yeah, exactly. It's that stage of trying to find that product market fit, seeing what clicks. And yeah, you're right. Customer feedback can be scarce,
Right,
in those
yeah.
early days. And the model says this phase usually lasts between 12 and 24 months.
Okay.
But that can be shorter, if you've got experience in business or just, you've got a strong skill set.
Right, right. So what should someone at this bootstrapper stage be focusing their energy on?
So I think the key here is refining your position.
Okay.
It's taking those core skills and based on those early signals from the market, really tweaking them,
Got it.
honing in on what it is you're offering,
Right.
always based on that market feedback.
So the model talks about what's happening internally and externally during this bootstrapper phase.
Yes.
Let's start with the internal side of things. What's going on inside the business, even just inside the founder's head at this point?
Yeah. Intrinsically, this is where you're going through a lot of personal growth. And if there's a team, the team is also growing together.
Right.
It's about identifying your core strengths.
Yeah.
What are we good at? And then what are the specialized talents that are starting to emerge?
Got it.
It's about finding your feet, both personally and as a business.
Right.
And the model says that this self-discovery phase really starts to solidify around, 9 to 12 months in.
Okay, so it's that period of, really getting clear on what you excel at, what are your unique abilities,
Yeah.
and probably hitting a few walls, that help you grow along the way.
Yeah. And that's what I love about this model, because I think we get caught up in this hustle culture where, it's all about results and, right? No, it's okay to bump into walls,
Sure. Yeah.
because those bumps, that's where the growth comes from.
Right.
That's where you start to see, maybe what the path is going to look like.
Okay, so that internal development then feeds into the external aspect, what's happening with, your customers, what's happening out in the world
Yeah.
at this point.
It's taking all that internal, stuff and putting it out there in the marketplace as your service, as your product, It's really identifying a problem and going, okay, this is the solution we're offering, and this is what we're looking for in return.
Right.
You know.
Compensation.
Compensation, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's really a negotiation with the market,
Right. Interesting.
You offer your solution and the market responds with payment. And what I love about this is as you get better at understanding your offering and as you start to understand the market more, this exchange becomes more predictable.
Makes sense. So circling back to those key activities in the bootstrapper stage,
Right.
it's really about knowing what you're good at explaining the benefits to
Yeah.
potential customers,
Mm-hmm.
and then consistently doing the work to generate that value and start making those exchanges happen.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. So what's the outcome of successfully going through that bootstrapper stage?
So if you can successfully navigate this stage, you come out with a deep understanding of your core strengths
Okay.
and a competitive edge that you've earned through all that, experimenting and adapting.
Or that messiness.
Yeah, through that messiness. And I think that's important to remember because so often we see these highlight reels of entrepreneurs
Sure.
and we forget that they all went through this,
Started somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a crucial part of the journey.
All right. So moving to that next stage, the executive stage.
Yeah.
It's not like a light switch flips,
No. Yeah.
It's more of a gradual shift, right?
Yep. It's a progressive development, and it takes time to really embody that, executive mindset. It's an accumulation of experience, of understanding, of approaching things in a different way.
Yeah. So for the learner, the big takeaway from the bootstrapper stage is if you're in that initial messy phase, it's completely normal.
It's expected.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the key thing is to stay focused on making those small changes, based on those early market signals, even if they are limited.
Yeah, because without that early validation, you're just spending a lot of money on a hobby.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've gone through those initial choppy waters. Let's get into that executive stage.
All right.
What's the main change in focus here?
So in the executive stage, the focus shifts to really understanding what the model calls the second core,
Okay.
and then maximizing every single component of your value chain.
All right, so the second core,
Yeah.
that's the who, what, where, when, how, and why of our customer, right?
Yeah.
And how they connect with our business.
Exactly. It's the who, what, where, when, how, and why of your ideal customer, and how they connect with your business.
Yeah.
It's the DNA of that customer relationship.
Got it.
And one thing that the model points out is that even after you discover this second core, it takes time to actually bake it into your business narrative and, the way you do things day to day.
Right.
So it's about, okay, I know who my customer is now. Let's develop programs, systems, protocols, even models, frameworks,
Right.
that all align with this deeper understanding.
Okay, so it's not just about, demographics.
Yeah.
It's really about making your entire operation
Exactly.
reflect this deep understanding of your customer.
It's about understanding their needs and their desires on such a deep level that you're able to actually turn them into advocates.
I love that.
Mm.
And then the other area of focus is maximizing the value chain.
Yeah.
So how is that different from just, providing value like you do in that bootstrapper stage?
So here's the thing. In the bootstrapper stage, you're just focused on providing a standard level of value.
Right?
Okay.
But at the executive level, you go beyond that.
Got it.
And you start to think, okay, how can I make all of my resources, all of my processes,
Yeah.
my workflows as efficient as possible?
Right.
How can I optimize that relationship between the customer and the product or the service?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so again, we see that internal and external split in the executive stage. So let's start with the internal side of things.
Okay.
What's happening internally as we move into this phase?
So intrinsically, you're focused on establishing really effective resource management.
Okay.
You're getting a deep understanding of where your resources are going and how you're using them.
Right.
At the same time, you're streamlining all those processes and workflows to eliminate any roadblocks to boost efficiency.
Got it.
And of course, you're continuing to define that customer product or service relationship.
Right.
We talked about that second core.
Yeah.
So really tightening the narrative, of who that customer is and how they experience your offering.
Got it. And what the model says here is the real sign that you've moved into the executive stage is when that story, when that narrative
Okay.
becomes mature.
Got it. I'm also sensing that good data starts to become really important at this stage.
Data becomes crucial.
Yeah.
And I love how the model puts it.
Yeah.
It says that you're moving away from those gut feeling decisions that you make in the bootstrapper stage.
Right.
And what they call it is licking your thumb.
I love that.
Right. You're going from licking your thumb to actually using data
Right.
to inform those choices.
It's like getting a GPS for your business decisions.
That's a great way to put it. So
Yeah.
you're implementing controls, you're putting in key performance indicators, KPIs,
Okay.
to make sure that you're on track and that you're really maximizing those resources.
Got it.
And it's not just about the numbers, you're also thinking about your team.
Hmm.
How is the team growing? How engaged are they?
Okay, so we're taking a more holistic view
Absolutely.
of the
Yeah.
entire business.
That's right.
Okay, so externally, on the extrinsic side of the executive stage, what's the main focus?
So on the outside, you're still refining that second core,
Go.
how you're presenting it to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And you're constantly trying to better understand how your customers are responding to your story
Mm-hmm.
and to all the different components of your value chain.
Okay.
You're always asking, do I have the capabilities to actually deliver on my promises?
Right.
Is the delivery of the product or service smooth and effective?
Got it.
And am I using that customer feedback loop, to continuously improve?
Makes sense. So the key activities here are identifying those critical KPIs
Mm-hmm.
throughout the value chain,
Yeah.
streamlining those workflows and
Mhm.
how you get feedback,
Absolutely.
defining and refining those resources and materials that you're using,
Mm-hmm.
mapping and improving all your processes,
Yeah.
making sure those transitions are smooth,
Yeah.
ensuring efficient output and delivery,
Yes.
and crucially using customer feedback to make those ongoing improvements.
It's about constantly iterating based on what your customers are telling you.
Okay, so what's the outcome of successfully, kind of going through that executive stage?
So if you can master the executive stage, you come out with a really well-structured value chain,
Okay.
effective delivery of your services and products, and a system in place to keep improving,
Based on that feedback.
based on that feedback loop. Exactly. And you see that overall sophistication in how you understand the market, supply chain,
Yeah.
your
yeah.
value chain, how you relate to customers, how you manage your employees.
Right. So for the learner, the big takeaway here is moving beyond just validating your idea,
Right.
which is that bootstrapper stage,
Mm-hmm.
but now really strategically analyzing
Yeah.
and optimizing every single part of your business.
Every single part. It's
Yeah.
like you're becoming this expert in how your business works.
Right.
What are all the levers and how do I pull them to deliver the maximum value?
Yeah. Okay, so we've leveled up from bootstrapper to executive. Now, let's explore the final stage in this model,
Yes.
the investor stage.
The big leagues.
Yeah. What's the main goal as a business reaches this point?
So the central goal of the investor stage is about leveraging all that value you've created to get those big results with less effort,
Less direct effort.
less direct effort.
Okay.
And there's this really fascinating shift in how you see your customers.
Okay.
It's a move towards what they call meaningfulness.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So leveraging value, that suggests it's about more than just making things efficient. Right?
It is. It's being able to create exponential growth
Okay.
instead of just linear improvement.
Mm-hmm.
It's about understanding that value chain that you spent all that time in the executive stage, optimizing.
Right.
And identifying those key points where you can really amplify the impact you're having.
Mm-hmm.
Like maximization is like, you're rowing a boat
Right.
and you're just rowing harder.
Yeah.
But leverage is adding more oars or building a faster boat.
I like that. Okay. And then this journey toward meaningfulness.
Yeah.
That sounds like a different kind of relationship with your customer.
Yeah, it's about building deep, meaningful relationships.
Okay.
And the model suggests even looking at things like the 5 love languages
Okay.
for your customer base.
Interesting.
Yeah. How so?
Well, it's about making a real difference in the lives of your customers and even your employees.
Okay.
It's moving away from seeing people as just transactions. So not just utilities.
Yeah, not just numbers on a spreadsheet.
Got it. So what are the internal aspects of the investor stage? What's happening inside the business that's operating at this level?
So internally, it's all about expanding your competencies.
Mm-hmm.
And not just through your own internal development, but strategically,
Right.
through partnerships and scaling strategies.
Oh, there.
So think about things like white labeling agreements,
Okay.
where another company is essentially selling your product under their brand.
Right.
Or forming business development partnerships that act like investors, bringing in new demand and resources.
So you're kind of farming out
You are.
all of that.
Yeah, and the key here is, strategically forming those alliances to scale every part of that value chain that you've already optimized.
Got it. And externally, the extrinsic side of the investor stage, How does that play out?
So externally, it's all about scaling how you deliver value.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing that through those strategic alliances.
Okay.
It's not about doing everything yourself. It's about tapping into the strengths of your partners.
Got it.
And that journey towards meaningfulness shows up externally in how you connect with those customers and the impact you have on their lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's becoming really sophisticated in how you use your efforts,
Yeah.
your movement, your resources to get that really effective scalability.
So the key activities in this stage are implementing those scaling strategies.
Yes.
And adjusting your core operations
Yeah.
to maximize that overall impact.
You got it.
So what's the outcome, of successfully implementing that investor stage?
The outcome that we're all looking for is exponential growth. And you get that through that strategic leverage.
Okay.
And you also build those deep emotional connections and engagement that leads to loyalty, that leads to fulfillment.
Yeah.
That's how you keep people around.
So for the learner, the takeaway from this investor stage is to start thinking beyond those incremental improvements to your operations.
Yeah, it's about thinking bigger.
Yeah.
Thinking about your business model in a way that can create those multiplier effects, those deep, meaningful relationships, not just with your customers, but also with your employees.
Yeah.
And it's about considering those unconventional ways to scale,
Okay.
like those strategic partnerships.
So it's almost like you're becoming a conductor
You are.
You know,
You're the maestro.
of value, orchestrating all of these resources and relationships
Exactly.
with
Beautiful symphony.
Yep.
Yeah.
maximum impact. Okay, so the evolution model also introduces this really interesting idea called the social mirror.
Oh, yeah.
That seems to bridge the gap between that bootstrapper and executive stage. What exactly is that?
So the social mirror is essentially the reflection of your business's value
Okay.
that you get from the marketplace. It's like holding up a mirror to your business, and the market is telling you, okay, this is what we see.
Got it. So it's the feedback you get from the market
It is.
that helps you understand what you're doing, what you could be improving on.
Precisely. And the model says you can't really understand your strengths and weaknesses in isolation.
Right.
It's only when the market interacts with what you're offering
Yeah,
that you get a clear picture.
right. So this feedback helps us align our internal strengths with the actual value that's perceived externally.
Absolutely. That's what it's all about. And that feedback either confirms your ideas, helps you tweak them, or sometimes even, completely challenges them.
Challenges you to rethink.
Rethink the whole thing.
Yeah. So what happens if we're not paying attention to that social mirror?
So the model suggests that businesses can go one of two ways.
Right.
They can mature
Oh,
by embracing the feedback,
right.
by being willing to adapt and change based on what the market's telling them,
Right.
or they stagnate
Right.
by resisting that feedback, by holding on to their assumptions even if the market's not responding.
So for those in that bootstrapper stage,
Yeah.
that transition from self-discovery to really understanding how the market sees them is key to moving forward.
That's the key to unlocking that next level.
Yeah, you got to be willing to put your offering out there and really interpret that feedback honestly.
Absolutely.
Right.
You can't be afraid of criticism.
Right.
You have to use it to fuel your growth.
Okay, so the model also says that there's this spectrum of growth within the bootstrapper stage itself.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So within that bootstrapper phase, there's a journey from those initial stumbles to a level of sophistication that starts to look like that executive stage.
Okay, so let's break that down.
Yeah.
What does level 1 typically look like in that stage?
Level 1 is a lot of passion, a lot of enthusiasm, but maybe not a super clear strategy.
Right.
The results might be inconsistent.
Got it.
It's that initial phase of just trying things out.
Yeah.
Maybe not having a great grasp of pricing or marketing,
Sure.
you know?
Figuring out which products or services actually resonate.
Exactly. So, level 1, it's chaotic, it's exciting, but it can also be a bit overwhelming.
Right. Okay, so what about level 2?
Level 2, you start to see some maturity
Okay.
that comes from interacting with that social mirror,
Right. Getting that feedback.
getting that feedback. So at this level, businesses are starting to track sales.
Okay.
They're figuring out what their best sellers are,
Mm-hmm.
putting some basic marketing in place,
Yeah.
and generally stabilizing,
Okay.
their operations.
So things are starting to click a little bit.
Things are starting to click. They're learning what works and doing more of it.
Got it. And then level 3 in the bootstrapper stage.
Level 3 is near executive.
Okay.
So here you see them implementing more systematic approaches.
Mm.
They might be mapping out processes,
Okay.
starting to hire their first employees,
Mm.
negotiating bulk pricing,
Yep.
getting better deals from suppliers.
Yeah.
They might even be starting to automate some of those repetitive tasks.
Okay.
And the big shift here is moving from working in the business to working on the business.
Right. So they're taking a step back
They
and
are
looking at the bigger picture.
exactly.
So for the learner, understanding these different levels within the bootstrapper stage can be really valuable
It can.
because it helps you see where your business is in terms of, operational maturity
Absolutely.
and what those next steps are to progress towards that executive level.
And I think it gives you a much more detailed view of that initial growth phase, because it's not just this one long struggle.
Right.
It's these small refinements that happen gradually.
Okay, so similarly, the model also outlines a spectrum of growth within the executive stage itself, illustrating that transition to that investor mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So can you walk us through those levels?
So the spectrum within the executive stage is really about highlighting how a business evolves from being focused on processes to incorporating strategic project-based thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and then finally starting to see things from that investor perspective.
Okay, so let's start with level 1 in the executive spectrum.
Right.
What's the focus there?
Level 1 is called process-oriented,
Okay.
and the main focus is making those internal operations more efficient.
Right.
So businesses at this level are putting in basic data tracking.
Okay.
They're figuring out where things are getting stuck.
Yeah.
And they're generally using that problem-solving approach
Mhm.
to smooth things out.
Okay, so they're really building those operational muscles.
They're getting their house in order.
All right, and then what about level 2?
Level 2 is the strategic project manager.
Okay.
And now the thinking starts to look outward a bit more.
Okay.
So at this stage, businesses are forming those strategic partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
They're undertaking these structured projects for expansion.
Got it.
They're building teams specifically to support growth.
Okay.
They're thinking beyond the day-to-day,
Right, so they're starting to think about those bigger initiatives.
Absolutely. They're setting the stage for some big moves.
And then the final level within the executive spectrum, the one that leads towards investor.
Level 3 is investor-minded.
Okay.
And the focus here shifts to really using all that value that you've built.
Mm-hmm.
So you're exploring those larger strategic alliances,
Okay.
potentially using capital, for big expansion.
Right.
And you're thinking about the long-term value of the business that market reach.
Got it.
The thinking shifts from just operational efficiency to really thinking like an investor.
Right, so for the learner, this is really clarifying that path towards becoming an investor.
Absolutely.
It's a step-by-step evolution from optimizing what you do internally to managing those projects and then finally adopting that external leverage and the financial mindset.
Exactly. And I think it's important to remember that reaching operational excellence, that's not the end goal.
Yeah.
The journey continues, towards that broader influence and creating more and more value.
So let's dive into that leveraging value aspect of the investor stage.
Okay.
The model really emphasizes a shift from maximization to leverage. Can you give us some real-world examples of how that looks in different industries?
Definitely. So the shift from just trying to get the most out of what you're doing to finding those ways to leverage what you have for that exponential growth, that's really what marks the investor stage.
Okay.
So let's look at a few examples across different sectors.
All right, so starting with leveraging resource management in the tech industry.
Okay.
What does that look like?
So let's take a SaaS company, software as a service.
Yeah.
At the executive stage, they might focus on, maximizing those internal resources.
Right.
Optimizing their team, streamlining development, managing that cloud infrastructure.
Got it.
But at the investor stage, they leverage their resources by forming these strategic white label partnerships with these huge organizations.
Right.
This lets them reach a much bigger customer base without needing to increase their internal resources.
Right.
And then they can also create this open API ecosystem
Okay.
that lets other developers integrate their technology into all these different products and services.
Got it.
So they're exponentially increasing their reach without having to do a lot more themselves.
Right, so using other people's resources to amplify your own impact.
Exactly.
Okay, what about leveraging process optimization?
Okay.
Maybe in manufacturing.
So a perfect example here is Tesla's gigafactories.
Okay.
In the executive stage, a manufacturer might optimize their factory processes to improve efficiency, reduce waste. But Tesla's at that investor level.
Right.
They've redesigned the entire process by building these highly scalable factory models, those gigafactories, that incorporate automation, robotics, vertical integration. They're controlling more of that supply chain. They're building these super efficient factories that can be replicated.
Right.
So it's not just about making things a bit better. It's about creating the potential for massive increases in their manufacturing capacity.
So the process itself becomes a leverage point.
It does.
Of a massive scalability.
It does.
Okay, so finally, how might a company in entertainment or media, leverage its customer product or service relationships?
So I love the example of Disney because in the executive stage, Disney was already really good at maximizing the value of their intellectual property, with movies, merchandise, theme parks. But at the investor stage, they built a whole ecosystem. Disney Plus turns those one-time movie ticket sales into subscriptions.
Recurring revenue.
Exactly. And each new movie or series, it's not just a standalone product. It's part of this bigger universe that keeps people engaged across all their platforms. The merchandise, the theme parks, future content, even the metaverse now. So they're turning viewers into lifelong participants in that Disney ecosystem, creating tons of opportunities for engagement and revenue.
So it's about moving beyond those incremental improvements to your operations to really rethink your model for that exponential impact.
That's what it's all about.
Okay, so let's talk about that journey towards meaningfulness.
Okay.
The final piece of the investor stage puzzle. The model talks about a second core 2.0.
Yes.
Moving beyond just strategic growth to a much deeper sense of contribution and impact. And even using, maybe a framework like the 5 love languages. So how does that actually show up in a business?
So this is a really interesting evolution of that second core. The investor level business isn't just thinking about expansion anymore. There's this deep desire to contribute to make a real impact. And using a framework like the 5 love languages can be really powerful. Because it helps you understand the emotional needs of your customers and your employees.
Interesting. Can you give us an example of a company that's really embodying this?
Yeah, so let's look at Patagonia. At their scale, they're not just focused on selling outdoor gear. It's their commitment to the environment, to ethical labor practices, that permeates everything they do. Their actions speak volumes. They donate to environmental groups. They offer repairs on their products to extend their lifespan. And that resonates deeply with their customers. It fosters this incredible loyalty that goes way beyond the quality of the product.
So it's about building a business with soul, where purpose drives profit.
Absolutely.